We bring you this special radio television broadcast in order to give you the very latest information on an amazing phenomenon, the arrival of a space ship in Washington. The Army has taken every precaution to meet any emergency which may develop. Just a minute, ladies and gentlemen, I think something is happening.
I was under non-exclusive contract with 20th Century Fox at the time, and I got a call from Darryl Zanuck saying that I should go see a producer named Julian Blaustein. He had a script that he thought I might be interested in, and Zanuck thought I might like. So I went over to meet Julian, and he gave me the script, and I loved it. I liked so much what it had to say about, warning the world about the sort of indiscriminate use of atomic warfare then, or nuclear warfare that came out later. I like the so-called message of it very much.
I came here to give you these facts. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder.
You know, if you want anything from the Army, from the Defense Department, in the way of equipment, you have to okay the script. Well, we wanted to have in Washington, we wanted to have those tanks roll out of place. We wanted to have those jeeps and carriers going around Washington at night, when they tried to catch them. So Fox had a man representing them in Washington. He gave the script to the Army, I guess, because I don't think the Defense Department was set up that way. Anyway, they gave it to them, and they turned it down. I guess they didn't like its message. But our guy in Washington was very smart. He said, he went to the National Guard back then. The National Guard had no problem with it. So all that equipment, that Army equipment you see in Washington, it all came from the National Guard. Just did an end run around the Army. Julian and I and Eddie North all kind of had in mind for Clad II Claude Rains, who was a very, very fine English character actor working in Hollywood for years, and just one of the outstanding talents. But as it turned out, he was busy on the stage in New York and was not available. And we were just starting to sit down and think about where we could go next, really kind of up in the air about that, when we got a memo from Darryl Zanuck, in which he said, I'd just come back from London, and while there I saw a young man on the stage that I was very impressed by, and he's not been in any pictures over here, and I don't think in any pictures in England, and I've signed him to a contract, and I think you should take a look at him as your man for The Day the Earth Stood Still. And of course, it was Michael Rennie. And I think that was a big plus for us, having somebody who was brand new to the screen, had never been seen in pictures by people before. He was a kind of tall and sort of ascetic-looking fellow. And I think that was one of the breaks you get sometimes in business right out of the blue, that we fell into it with Michael.
But he's a robot. Without you, what could he do?
There's no limit to what he could do. He could destroy the Earth. All vehicles, close in. Let's go.
I don't think I've ever had a film in which I felt that the background score contributed any more, as much as to that. That score just adds so much to that film. It was just a brilliant score, using the theremin, I think, for one of the very first times. He was quite a character. But it's very, very marvelous talent, marvelous talent. And a man of size. He was a very intelligent man and very well read and very interested in the world, what was going on in politics. You know, he was not just completely buried in his music. He was, but he was God's angry man, I think, one of them. One of the strengths, I think, of The Day the Earth Stood Still is that fact that it's very realistic. It was done in black and white, shot made in our capital in Washington. Very mundane kind of streets, a boarding house he wanders into. We show the cars in the street when everything goes dead for all the electricity's off for half an hour. We're right in Washington seeing some of those scenes. I think it added credibility to it, made people believe it more than the average science fiction film, perhaps. I had got to the end of the 60s, and I looked back just for briefly on my career of the 60s, and I realized for the last 3 pictures I'd been doing period. I'd done Sound of Music, which was 30s in Austria. I had done Sand Pebbles, which was the 20s in China. I just finished Star with Julie Andrews, going from World War I to World War II, and I felt very much the need to do something right now, right contemporary. And just about that time, I was looking around for something, and Universal called me and said they had the galleys of a new book, and they thought it was very interesting, and knowing I was looking for something, would I be interested in taking a look at it? If I liked it, they'd buy it for me. That was Andromeda Street, because it seemed to just fit my strong need to do something that's very, very now, very contemporary.
Any messages for me from the White House? Not a thing, Dr. Stone. Oh, you have it.
The set you've just seen is the nerve center of a secret 5-story underground laboratory, which is the star of the Andromeda Strain, my new film for Universal.
We see bodies, lots of them.
Stager stations, hit that security button.
We need a flyby over Piedmont, New Mexico. Infrared, a FLIR scan, all sectors, film to come direct to scoop.
It's growing.
I liked the Andromeda Strain when it put an indictment of biological warfare. And not heavy-handedly, but it was in there, and I liked that what it had to say. So it gave me an opportunity to get into modern technology. I went over to Caltech and then on to Jet Propulsion Lab, and so all other equipment went on. I got my 3 technical advisors from the Jet Propulsion Lab. I went out to place that manufactures those remote hands that you work through the glass and all. And once again, there was a chance to do some science fiction that was earthbound. That was not one of my favorite experiences, not from the personal thing. Working with the actors, Bill and Leonard and Michelle and all the others was fine. We got along fine. But we had to start shooting before we were ready. They had the actors on payroll for a long time, and having delay after delay started even before I came on it. And finally they said, you've got to start shooting, let's say August 1st, whatever the date was, hot or cold. So we had to start shooting with only the first act of the script in the right proper shape. So we were rewriting that script all the way through to the very end. That's not a satisfactory way to work. And then we had to change special effects men. The studio had already signed on a small special effects outfit to do it. People did not have any experience in major films, and so by the time we were about finished shooting, and I asked to see some tests of things they were doing, I became convinced that they wouldn't be able to get it done in the time that we had, because we had a release date the following Christmas, so we had to let them go. And fortunately, I was able to get Doug Trumbull, who fell free at the time, and John Baxter with his outfit to come in and split the work and share it. But we were so far behind by this time that they had to work their crews practically day and night and 7 days a week to make our release date. So all those elements made it not the most happy overall experience that I had, although I say working with the actors and all was fun. I've had so many people over the years say to me, Mr. Wise, you made the scariest picture I've ever seen and you didn't show anything. How did you do it?
God, it knows I'm here.
I read a review of the book in Time magazine. I thought it sounded interesting, possibility for a story the kind that I'd made with Luton, where there was more suggestion than were actual horrific effects in it.
God. God. Whose hand was I holding?
But someplace down the line, after we got the screenplay done, the United Artists got a little cold feet on it and backed out of it, and I had it in turnaround. And I had left MGM under a contract that I'd gotten out of earlier, a few years before, and so I owed them a picture. And my agent said, hey, maybe this will go to MGM, that'll fill that commitment you have to do another picture for them. And I went over to MGM, and they liked it, but they only wanted to put $1 million in it. And the best budget I could get on the film at Culver City, MGM, was $1.4 million. And I happened to be going to London just about that time for a command performance of West Side Story, and somebody said, well, you know, MGM has a studio. Well, maybe they can give you a better budget that MGM will live with. So I did, took it with me, met with them, discussed it, gave them the script, and they came back with a budget of $1,040,000, and the studio went for it. So the picture, although I kept the New England background because I thought the haunted house was a little fresher in New England than in England, because around every corner is a haunted house in England. But I shot it all in England, kept the New England background of Shirley Jackson's original book.
This is Luke, who didn't believe in anything until evil, patient and waiting, made him change his mind.
Did you hear me calling?
Oh, this house. You have to watch it every minute.
The Haunting was produced and directed by Robert Wise, brilliant producer of West Side Story. The stars consist of a cross-section of top talent in the world of entertainment. Julie Harris, Claire Bloom, Richard Johnson, Russ Tamblyn.
What does it take to convince you that the dead do not always rest in peace? That some houses, like Hill House, are born bad?
That was an old manor house about 10 miles outside of Stratford-on-Avon. And it was a hotel. It was being used as a hotel. We stayed in it. And it's been refurbished and fixed up. Somebody sent me a brochure on it just recently. It looks very nice. It's another case where I used some infrared for those establishing shots early on when nobody was in it. Because you use infrared, you can't have people that, changes the faces. But if you just have, you can't have too much greenery. But I used infrared there to bring out the striation in the stones to make it look even worse than it was. I had a funny experience with that in terms of lenses. I knew how when you see that kind of film, a lot of fun for directors. You do so much with your angles and your photography and your sound and your music. They're really fun, more fun than the average film. I wanted to get some wide kind of extreme angles, and at that time, which was early on in Panavision, they only had the widest film they had was about 35. So I called Bob Gottschalk, who was the head of Panavision and invented the whole thing in Hollywood. I knew Bob well. I asked him, I said, Bob, don't you have anything wider than the 35? Because I need something extreme. He said, well, we are working on something. We're developing something. It's in the stages of about a 28, but it's got distortion in it. I said, that's just exactly what I want. I want that distortion. That's just right for this film. I had to twist his arm. Finally, he agreed to send it over to me, but I had to sign a document saying I wouldn't hold him responsible for any distortion. So some of those shots in The Haunting were shot with that lens. I've done 39 films, and I have maybe a dozen of them favorites for one reason or other. Sound Music, West Side, of course, but Theater, Sit Still, and the Setup, and the Sand Pebbles, and The Haunting, and I Want to Live, and I say a dozen. I don't have a single favorite. I don't know, when you ask directors that, do most of them have a single favorite? The only one I've ever heard of was Kazan, who seems to have said America, America was his because it's sort of biographical, autobiographical. But I don't